Hello, I'm Gigi the Reader, and today I will be reviewing The Yellow Brick War by Danielle Page. I also have a guest speaker here, or guest narrator with me, by the name Shaquita. Shaquita the Fairy. She's the fairy of the bees. Okay, I'm going to get started until she joins us. We leave off the last book where Glamora, Gert, Mombi, and Knox, along with Amy and Dorothy, they were stuck in Kansas now except for Dorothy, who was able to use her ruby shoes to escape back to Oz. They all ended up in Kansas after Dorothy and Amy had a small run-in or battle with the wizard, while he cast a spell opening a portal to Kansas in a plot or attempt to take over Oz. This all ended up with Dorothy killing him. Oops. Hold on, y'all. Wait, let's. Okay. Just a minute. Hold on. I'm coming. Oh my God. Hold on. Hello. Excuse you.
Hello. Why is this door locked?
Because
Why is the door locked?
I'm recording.
I mean, you not just walk in. I don't have to knock on the door.
Okay.
You got the door locked. I suppose they just open the door. You ain't gotta have a door lock. What you doing up here? You gotta have a door lock for.
I'm recording. Excuse you.
I should be able to just walk in. So what's popping?
But you are late.
What?
Story time.
What? Wait. It's story time?
Yes.
It's story time, and you didn't tell me it was story time.
Right.
So you ain't just doing story time without me.
Well, I was waiting for you.
You know what? You know what?
Mm-hmm.
Well, excuse me.
What?
Move that. I need to get to the mic.
Okay, you at the mic.
I need to get to the mic. Excuse me. Well, what's going on?
I already told you.
Sookie, looky.
Yes.
What's this one? What's this story about?
The Yellow Brick War.
The Yellow Brick what? Yellow Brick, huh?
The Yellow Brick War.
Oh, what?
Oh my God.
Amy about to get started again with this dog on. Here we go again.
Yeah.
Okay. We gotta see what Amy do this time.
Right.
She gonna get it popping this time. Okay.
Yep.
Continue on. Here's your mic.
Thank you. Okay, where was I at? I was rudely interrupted. Okay, so they all stuck in Kansas, and from the last book, it all ended with Dorothy killing the wizard. After all of this, the portal was closed after Dorothy whisked herself away with her shoes back to Oz. It left Amy, Knox, Mombi, Glamora, and Gert stuck in Kansas. None of them had the ability to get back to Kansas because they can't use their magic in Kansas. They can't cast spells by using they cast spells by using the magic in Oz they draw off of. But there's no magic in Kansas to draw off of, so they're all stuck in the middle of Dusty Acres Trailer Park, where there are no more trailers because of the tornado that cleared the park. The same tornado that landed Amy and Oz. They come up with the only plan they know. They know that before Dorothy left Oz the first time, Glinda had given her a pair of shoes to bring herself back to Oz. Somehow the shoes were left behind. If Amy could find the shoes, they might open up the portal back up to Oz and give them a chance of getting back to Oz. The last place the silver shoes were thought to be was at Dorothy's farm where she lived. The farm is gone now, but Amy's high school sits where the farm once was. They sent Amy on a mission to find the shoes. Amy is reluctant at first because the last place she wants to go is back to high school. The high school she was suspended from right before the tornado hit that sent her to Oz. The high school where she had no friends and was bullied by Madison Pendleton and another girl. It was also where she had to face the mean superintendent principal, Mr. Starchin. This also meant she had to find her mother. She'd have to let her know that she was back and think of a story as to where she was all the time she was missing. She'd also need to get an address to re-register in school. She figured her mother was in a shelter somewhere. After some arguing with her crew, she agreed to go on the mission. After all, she did want to see her mother again and let her know she was okay. Since they were stranded in the middle of an empty trailer park area, Amy asked where would they all stay while she was off searching for these silver slippers. Mommy said they had enough magic energy in them to hide themselves in the Darklands. The Darklands is an area where witches and others with magical ability go during a teleportation spell. They end up in a dark area, but they reach their before they reach their destiny. They said they'd hide there until she returned, but they would still be able to watch her from where they were and wherever she went. So with all that said and done, Amy went off towards downtown area of Flat Hills, Kansas, to search for her mother. She found her in an apartment building where a lot of tornado survivors ended up at. When she got there, she was surprised to learn that the mission had set her mother up in her own apartment. When Amy rang the buzzer at her mother's apartment room, her mother ran down the stairs and was elated and overjoyed to see her. Amy was surprised to see that her mother was sober and healthy looking. She quickly walked Amy to her new apartment. The apartment didn't have much furniture, but it did have 2 bedrooms, something she didn't have in the trailer home that where they lived. She told Amy that she insisted that the mission put her in a 2 bedroom apartment because she never gave up hope that she'd return home. So now Amy had her own bedroom. Her mother had sparsely furnitured the room with a bed, a nightstand, and a lamp. Amy was also surprised that her mother had gotten a job as a cashier at a local store. She even had a new boyfriend. His name was Jake, who lived in an apartment building on another floor. When she met Jake, she thought he was a nice and decent guy who was nothing like her mother's past boyfriends. Amy is happy that her mother is happy. She's working and has a new boyfriend now. Amy's mother doesn't register her back in school right away. So the next day when her mother goes off to work, Amy figures she'll get a head start on how to find the silver slippers before she starts school. She Googles the story of a tornado that happened in Flat Hills back in 1897. Surprisingly, a story pops up. The original newspaper clipping an article about Miss Dorothy Gale, who was interviewed by a reporter by the name of L. Frank Baum. Oddly, L. Frank Baum is also the author of the Wizard of Oz stories and all the series that followed after that. But at the time, he was only a reporter who had interviewed Dorothy. So Dorothy really did exist. So L. Frank Baum ended up writing a book from her story. But the rest of the article was missing from the site. So Amy had to find the rest of the article to find the shoes. In the meantime, she knew she had to get back into school. After her mother talked to the principal into letting her come back. But her mother did ask Amy where she'd been for the past month that she was missing. Amy said she was in another town at a hospital with amnesia. She said she couldn't remember who or where she was from. Then one day her memory just suddenly came back to her. That was the best story she could come up with as quick as she could off the top of her head. So anywho, moving on, Amy goes back to school. The first day there are flowers and notes taped to her locker with everyone's well wishes and homages to her returning home safely. Her missing had become somewhat of a media sensation when she was away. Even though the students were still standoffish towards Amy, they still spoke and said the occasional welcome back. Surprisingly, who but who walks up to her and starts the conversation like they're best buds, welcoming her back. But Miss Madison Pendleton, yes, the same pregnant girl who got Amy kicked out of school and put on suspension. She was the one bullying Amy at school. Madison, the popular girl who hung out with the cool kids. Madison, the pregnant girl who hit and pushed Amy down in the school's hallway, causing Amy to go to the principal's office and get suspended for supposedly starting a fight with a pregnant girl, the way the principal put it. She walks up and starts chatting with Amy. She's not pregnant anymore. She's had the baby. Her baby is strapped to her chest in one of those baby carrier things. I have to add on the text on the page, what Amy says about the girl. She doesn't say it out loud, but in her mind, I have to quote what she said on page 64 about what she thought of Madison's baby. Say, to quote Amy, what she thought when she looked at this baby, she said, Madison's baby was downright ugly. He looked like a little old man who couldn't find his dentures. His cheeks was too fat and his face was squashed looking, as if someone had stepped on his head. Plus, he was bald as an egg. I felt bad for him. Oh my God. Okay, excuse me. Wait a minute. Hold on.
Excuse me, okay. Alright, okay, Amy. Now you know you tried for that, Amy, going down that girl's baby like that. I mean, she went smooth in on that baby.
He did.
Yeah, Amy just said, Amy, you trifling that. You trifling. I mean, that they say babies and kids is off limit, but Amy didn't mind. She thinks since she had a little bit of the eyes, she thinks she's straight up thug now. I mean, she might be. I mean, she did kill the lion. She did kill the scarecrow. And she did take the tin man's heart out of his chest. But you straight up trifling for that. You went smooth in on that baby. You called that baby everything but that ass but ugly. I mean, he probably is, but you didn't have to say. You didn't have to say. I mean, wow. You know, you just, they say babies is off limits. Babies and kids should be off limits. Not in this book. Not after Miss Dorothy Page had Amy and, I'm sorry, what's her name?
Danielle.
The author, Danielle Page, had Amy go smooth in on that baby.
She sure did.
Wow.
So Amy is surprised. She wants to be friends with her all of a sudden. Later, she finds out why during her lunch break in the lunchroom. She goes to sit at a lunch table by herself like she would normally does, while all the cool kids sit at the crowded table. Surprisingly, not only does Madison come up to sit with her, but her boyfriend, or should I say baby daddy, Dustin, sits down with her. Amy is further shocked when Madison gets her caught up on her personal life since she was missing. She says she got kicked out of her parents' house and was living with Dustin now at his family's house. Although she is living at his parents' house, they have broken up, and she's no longer hanging with the cool and popular kids because they've all snubbed her since she had her baby and ignoring her, especially her once closest friend, Amber. Amy is skeptical of Dustin and Madison trying to befriend her all of a sudden. In Madison's own words, she told Amy she had ruined her life by becoming a teenage mom. Amy asked her, what about Dustin? Dustin was the popular guy on the school's football team who was supposed to go on to be a star with a scholarship. He had been kicked out of the popular kids group too, but not because of Madison. Dustin quickly let Amy know that Madison didn't ruin his life. In his own words, he says, she didn't ruin my life. I blew out my knee in the game right before Dustin Jr. was born. So now he had no chance of a football career. Then Madison admits she wants to be friends with Amy because she was the most interesting thing that ever happened to Flat Hill. Then Madison pries into Amy trying to find out what really happened to her while she was missing. And Amy is tired of trying to make up a funny story about where she was, so she tells them straight out about where she was and how Dorothy from the Wizard of Oz really existed, and about the article she found when she googled the story of the Wizard of Oz, and a real reporter by the name of L. Frank Baum, the guy who wrote the Wizard of Oz, got his story from a real girl by the name of Dorothy Gale. So of course they don't believe her, but they are still curious. So Amy comes up with an idea. Since they want to be her buddies now, she tells them she'll need help finding the silver slippers that she thinks are hidden in the school somewhere, since the school sits in the property where Dorothy Farm was. Then they eagerly agree to help. Amy gets an idea for Dustin to help her look in the school's library. Amy and Dustin were both in detention together, so they asked for library duty. They had to clean the library after school, so they were alone in the library. At first, they see nothing of interest, flipping through the books. Then they come up upon a room in the back of the library. The sign on the door reads "Archive." It had a lock on it. Bracing one foot up against the door frame, Dustin grabbed the doorknob and pulled. The door came away from the frame, and they were in the room. It was basically a storage room full of old boxes filled with school banners and yearbooks. Dustin went inside the room to stand guard. Dustin went outside the room to stand guard in case the principal came back to see what they were doing. Then Amy spots a box way in the back of the small room. She reaches in the box and something stung her finger, and this is what ensued next. Tendrils of darkness crept across the floor towards me. A slender silvery form stepped out of the shadows and looked down on me. A slender silvery form stepped out of the shadows and looked down on her. It was mostly hidden by the darkness, but she could see and make out swirling black robes and a pale bald skull topped with a twisted iron crown. It hissed. I heard its voice inside my head rather than out loud, and I clapped my hands over my ears in a futile attempt to shut it out. And then it spoke. You found what I've hidden, little witch. My congratulations. Amy struggled to speak and asked, Who are you? The voice answered, You'll find out soon enough, little witch. You are strong and clever to have uncovered so easily what I concealed so carefully. Your witch could not see what I had put away here so many years ago. Even your Dorothy could not find what once had been hers, but you found it without magic, as if it was calling to you. You are very strong indeed, perhaps even stronger than my other little friend. What other little friend did it mean, Dorothy? Amy thought to herself. The voice continued. We will see each other again, my dear. I'm beginning to think you shall be quite useful to me, but now is not the time for explanations. Give my regards to your friends. Until next time, little witch, watch your back. Not all your friends are trustworthy. And then he stepped back into the shadows and disappeared. It felt as if his magic had loosened its grip on her, and she slumped to the floor. The entity vanished. Amy peered back in the box. She saw nothing but an old notebook with blank pages. She wondered whoever the mysterious visitor had been, it had been waiting its time, protecting the blank book. At any rate, she figured it was a clue, and maybe Mombi could figure it out. So she took the book and stuffed it in her book bag. Later that day after school, while Amy was alone in her bedroom, Mombi shows up. She shows up from the darkness through a magical spell. She's not really there. She's just a sort of hologram projection of herself. She asks Amy has she found any clues. Amy shows her the book. Mombi casts a spell to see the words on the book and sees that it's just a diary Dorothy kept about her story in Oz, but no clues as to where the silver slippers were. Amy tells her about the entity that showed up in the library, and Mombi tells her it sounds like it was the Gnome King. Amy asks her what's a gnome. She tells her a gnome is a cross between a fairy and a demon who live in the underworld of Eve. The Gnome King tried to invade Oz years ago, but Ozma stopped him. Mombi tells Amy he has to find the shoes before the Gnome King does. The next day at school, Amy, Madison, and Dustin are in the hallway talking. Amy was trying to think of some more clues as to where the silver slippers might be. Amy walked past a dusty old diorama display in the school's hallway. The diorama is basically a depiction of the story of Wizard of Oz in a glass display case. It has a small farm display with barn animal figurines that also include a small figurine of Dorothy, and surprisingly to Amy's astonishment, Dorothy's figurine was wearing a pair of silver slippers. And there they were, right there in the dusty display case the whole time. But just as she noticed them, Assistant Principal Starchin showed up. He snapped at Madison and asked why she wasn't in class. Madison walks away in a huff, then he looks at Amy and Dustin and says, I have questions for you, Amy. But then something wasn't right about his voice. It reminded her of the Gnome King's voice as she heard the night before in the school's library. Then it happened. Principal Sarchin's face was stretching in front of her, and it was changing. It wasn't really Principal Starchin, but the Gnome King, who was shapeshifted into the principal. He had just realized Amy discovered the silver slippers in the display case. He threw bolts of magic before she could reach the case. Dustin tried to help fight him off, but Amy begged him to run and get help because he didn't realize what he was fighting, but he wouldn't run. He stayed. Just then, out of nowhere, Nox showed up out from a spell out of the Darklands realm. He was side by side with Amy and Dustin fighting. At some point, Dustin and Knox were fighting with the Gnome King. Amy takes her jacket off, wraps it around her arm, and breaks the display case with her elbow. She reaches in the display case and takes the tiny silver slippers off Dorothy's figurine. The shoes start to grow to a normal size. She put the shoes on her feet. They grew onto her feet and changed to thin silk fabric covered with dozens of hand-sewn sequins that crept up her ankle. Dorothy's magic shoes had turned into a pair of diamond-studded leather boots, and they fit better than any shoe she ever owned. She felt the magic flow through her whole body. Then the Gnome King sent a tornado portal down that swept her and Knox back to Oz. When they woke up back in Oz, they were outside the Tin Woodman's palace. Surprisingly, Gert, Mombi, and Glamora was there too. When Amy asked them how they made it there, Mombi explained they were all bound together in Kansas, so when her and Knox were swept into the portal, they came through with them. They ended up going inside the palace to rest and plan their next mode of attack. The Tin Woodman's palace is also the Wicked Witch of the West's old palace. While they were talking, we find out that Oz was first ruled by a queen named Ginger. We find out that Glinda and the Scarecrow, who once used an army to kick Ginger off the throne, then put Ozma on the throne. Glinda thought she could rule through Ozma, but Ozma banished Glinda. When Dorothy returned to Oz, she freed Glinda. So that's how Glinda and Oz became friends. Anyway, they are all inside the abandoned palace now, thinking of their next plan of attack on Dorothy and the Gnome King winning if he decided to invade Oz. While they were planning and plotting, Glinda shows up outside of the palace with an army of robot clones ready to fight. So just before Glinda showed up with her army, Melinda and Annabelle showed up at the palace. They're friends with Knox and the Order of the Wicked. Knox taught them how to fight. They also once worked for Mombi and Gert to spy on Dorothy at one time too. Glinda is out there. She's waiting for a fight. She's challenging everyone in the palace. Glinda is there floating above her army in front of the palace with Pete and Ozma in chains. Remember from the last story when Dorothy whisked herself out of Kansas and back to Oz, Pete and Ozma were there back in Oz alone. That's when Glinda must have captured them and put them in chains. But I'm a little bit confused. I didn't know that Pete had become a separate person from Ozma. Pete was a sort of her alter ego, but now he was a whole separate person. Anywho, they are captured by Glinda now and are in chains. So as Mombi, Gert, Knox, Amy, Melinda, and Annabelle are in the palace, and they try to think of a plan, but Glamora stops them and says she wants to fight her twin sister alone. So they all warn her and tell her it's too dangerous, but Glamora insists. While floating out towards her sister, Glamora starts to disrobe from her clothes. Her gown falls away. She's naked. She then starts to shed her skin, revealing her real skin underneath. It's like armor. It's purple and glittering in the sun. She sheds until she looks like a living jewel. So then she goes out to confront her sister, because Glinda out there talking much stuff. She calling them all outside.
Where this hoe at? Because, bitch, I'm about to fry this bitch up. I'm going to get that bitch a chance to talk and say what she got to say. I'm going to say, so is it you, bitch, you reporting?
So they begin to battle, throwing lightning bolts at each other, while Glinda's army of clones take a battling ram and knock down the doors to the palace and spill inside, forcing Mombi, Gert, Knox, Melinda, Annabelle, and Amy to fight with the army. They manage to fight the army back outside onto the grounds of the palace. Then all of a sudden, in the middle of the medley of clash, Dorothy shows up with her army. She has an army of 10 men. The 10 men are there, and that's what's left of the Tin Woodman's army. Not only does Dorothy have an army, but she's riding a giant 3-headed monster. The monster is actually Toto. She puts a spell on him to turn him into a fighting, snapping monster. So Glinda is shocked to see Dorothy. Dorothy is angry that Glinda showed up to fight with Glamora, Gert, and Mombi with her behind her back. She thought Glinda was trying to take over Oz before she could, so she starts to fight with Glinda. So they go back and forth for a minute.
No, you look like an octopus with a wig, bitch.
So they just going in on each other. Glinda and Dorothy is like,
Bitch, your mom, bitch. How are you a cloud chaser? Shut up. Oh, I don't need you. You a cloud chasing ass. I don't need your bitch ass. Fuck you.
wow. So So they go. So they going in on each other. So suddenly Dorothy's army just started fighting with Glinda's army. So anyway, Shakita gone.
A minute.
Shut up, gone. Gone.
What did Dorothy say to Glinda that she pulled up with her army? Dang. What the heck going on? Is this a fairy tale? Did she put up with her 10-man army and they just go smooth in on each other?
Yes.
Because she thought Glamora was trying to take over the kingdom. Or
Yes.
Glinda was trying to take over the kingdom before she was. So Dorothy. Oh my God.
Yes. Oh my
Oh my
God.
God. I thought it was going to be a PG-13 story. What
Yeah.
is that? What's wrong with Danielle Page? Then Lulu hopped up in the mix.
Now
I'm going to let you get to that part. Okay.
right. Let me
All
get.
right, go ahead. I'll let you finish. Get to that part where Lulu pulls up too.
Yeah. Let me get to that part. Then out of
It's a
the.
hot mess right here.
Yeah.
My bees don't keep up this much. Oh,
Mm,
go ahead.
okay. So then out of the blue, Lulu shows up with her army of wingless monkeys. Though they are wingless, they are flying with mechanical wings. They're there to help Glamora, Nox, Gert, Mombi, and the rest of them. And then, wait a minute. Oh, wait a minute.
Wait a minute. Wait.
Oh my
What's
God.
going on?
Wait.
What's going on?
Craziness.
Wait a minute. Where you going?
I'm leaving.
Let me see where the story is at. What the hell? Okay, we got, let me see, I'm lost myself. I gotta find out. Don't leave me in here with this hot mess, Miss Gigi the reader. Don't leave me in here with this hot mess.
You can handle it. You can handle it.
Okay, we got this, like you say, a medley, a clash between Dorothy. All of a sudden, Glamora and Glinda's fighting with Glinda's crazy clone army. And then here comes Dorothy, along with some kind of 10-man army. And then I heard to fight Glinda. Okay. So then Glinda and Dorothy's army get to fighting. And she distracted from Glamora. Then here comes Lulu. And then Melinda and Annabelle and Nox and Gert and Mombi on the side fighting. And and what the hell is Dorothy's on a 3-headed monster that is actually Toto.
Yes.
What is Danielle? What's wrong with Danielle Page?
I don't know.
Seriously, what's wrong with that? It says she has turned Toto into a 3-headed monster.
Yep.
And he's fighting with, this is a hot mess right here. Then here come Lulu in the mix with her monkey. And she put her wingless army. And she's helping to fight, which is a good thing, but damn. I mean, people, you're going to have fight in one battle. Okay. You got to, no, you take this mic back. I go sit back, I hear my bee. This is Shaquita, the fairy of the bees. I hear my bees calling me. I gotta go see about these bees. I'm not gonna put up with, I'm the fairy of the bees. I just cannot. I don't even know if it, I'm gonna let you handle this. Well, you do a little bit more, then I'll be back.
Oh, you leaving?
Got to go.
Oh my God. Okay.
My bees calling me.
Okay. So then Amy, getting tired of the entire medley of hot mess confusion, decides to finally use the magic silver boots. She turns into some type of Hulk-looking monster, which gives her the power to kill the 3-headed monster Toto. She chops all 3 of his heads off with her sword. The monster falls over and Dorothy is trapped halfway under Toto's dead carcass. Amy shrinks back down to her normal size and stands over Dorothy as she is trapped and struggling to free herself. Dorothy looks up at Amy and says, it always comes back to you, doesn't it? You can't kill me and you're not going to win. With that, her red heels flashed with a pulse of ruby light, and then she was gone. As soon as she vanished, her 10 shoulders and robots were deactivated and stopped fighting. And Lulu the monkey, the queen of the wingless monkeys, looks up at Amy and says the most epic and sensible thing in the entire trilogy of the series of the story since Amy has been trying to kill Dorothy. And quote, she says to Dorothy, "Is it too much to ask that you just kill the bitch?" Hold on, wait a minute. she come again.
Hey,
Hmm.
what's going on?
Again. Oh my God.
Oh, Miss Danielle Page.
Yes.
She at it again.
Yes.
Oh my God. What? Let me see. Where you at in the story? Oh yeah, that part. Mm. You know she messy.
Very.
You know she messy with this Amy and Dorothy stuff. This don't make no sense right here.
It
I
does.
see where she got the war going on between Dorothy and her sister Glamora.
Not her.
Where is
Not
it
her.
right now?
Not her.
Okay, I see. Okay, so they got their army set up,
Right.
and it's Glinda and Dorothy army can stand right in the middle. She comes in right in the middle where Glinda and Glamora fight, and here comes Dorothy with her little 10-man army, and then Melinda and Annabelle is in the mix with Knox and Gert and Mombi and Oh my God, yeah, this is a hot mess right here. This is a hot mess right here, Gigi the reader. You're gonna have to handle this.
Oh my God. I'm so tired of them.
No.
Mm-mm.
You're gonna have to handle this one because you know this is messy. Miss Danielle Page. This got this all twisted around.
She do.
This is a hot mess right here. And I don't blame Lulu make the monkey, the queen of the wingless monkeys makes the most sense.
She does.
She said, why you just can't straight smooth kill this bitch? That's what she should listen to Lulu. You had Dorothy almost. I'm with Lulu. She should have smooth, straight killed her while she could have. Cause Lulu ain't never lied. Why can't you just kill this bitch?
Right.
I mean, that's what she's saying.
Yeah.
Well, I gotta go see about my bees. I'm fairy of the bees. I'm going to see about my bees. My bees ain't this messy. I can only be Shaquita. Shaquita the fairy of the bees. That's my title right there. I can't handle this. I'm just gonna get on out of here and go see about this some messy stuff. Okay. Nah, because I can't. I'm gonna get his mic back to you. Cause that Miss Danielle Page got this a hot mess right here.
Okay, so in the end, after the battle is over, they find that Annabelle is dead. She didn't survive the battle, but Melinda did. During the battle, Glamora and Glinda got tangled up in a brawl that ended with Glamora on top of Glinda, wailing and beating the hell out of her. Then, as Amy describes it, Glinda's form disappeared or dissolved into a pink light flowing upward into Glamora. So Glamora's body rose slowly in the air, revolving in a pink cloud of power, and then a final flash of pink light exploded, and a huge boom. Only one witch lay crumpled on the ground. So some type of thing happened where she actually absorbed her own sister, and that's how Glinda disappeared, and Glamora won the fight. And the other was gone. It was Glamora laying there. Glinda had disappeared with some type of melding spell that destroyed her evil twin sister. So the two sisters became one, with Glamora being the surviving sister and Glinda being destroyed. Next, we find out that Pete and Ozma were two separate people. Now, Pete was once Ozma's alter ego, but now he's a separate person that Glinda has taken prisoner when she took Ozma prisoner. They both still had on chains on them. Amy uses the magic from her silver boots to remove the chains from Pete and Ozma. She then tells Pete that she never wants to see him again. Her, Knock, and Glamora are angry with him for getting the witch Polychrome and her pet panther Heathcliff killed from the last book. Amy orders him to leave for good. He turns and walks away. After that, Glamora, Mombi, Gert, and Amy have some type of seance and find out that Dorothy is trying to siphon the magic off the great clock in the palace in the Emerald City. By unleashing the power off the clock, by drawing the power off the clock, she could destroy Kansas. She hates Kansas, but doesn't realize she could also destroy Oz in the process. Later, we find out that Amy has made up her mind. She is fed up with Oz. She said once she defeated Dorothy, she was going to go back to Kansas for good. To quote her on page 198, she says, Oz would have to solve his own problems, unquote. In another scene, Knox takes her to a scrying pool outside the palace in the garden. A scrying pool is a type of crystal ball. They looked in it, and she could see her mother in Kansas. She saw her sitting in the living room with on the couch with her boyfriend. She could see Dustin and Madison there with her too. She could also see the principal, Mr. Starchin, there. She could see the principal. He wasn't really the principal, but the Gnome King who had taken possession of the principal's body. From the scrying pool vision, he sent a mental message to Amy. He told her that he was coming for her. When the vision dissipated, Knox asked her what did she see. She told him what the Gnome King said. He said he's coming for me. Knox asked, coming for you to do what? And Amy said, I don't know. He doesn't care if we kill Dorothy. He's got something in mind. The next day, Knox, Amy, Gert, Glamora, and Mombi teleport to the Emerald City to find Dorothy. They make their way inside the palace. There they find Dorothy clutching a great clock. Dorothy tells Amy that the clock has enough magic to keep her going for as long as she wants, but Amy tells her using the clock will let loose all of Oz's magic, and Oz and Kansas are two sides of the same place. You know that, and you'll destroy them both. Dorothy says she didn't care and threw the clock into the pool. Lurline's pool, a magical pool. A huge cloud formed. In the cloud, Amy could see a portal to Kansas. Kansas was being destroyed. Amy, not thinking, jumped into the pool to retrieve the clock. Inside the pool, Amy ended up in some type of parallel world where she meets Ozma's great-great-great-grandmother, Lurline. She looks a lot like Ozma except she has wings. She's a fairy. Lurline tells Amy she watches over her and Ozma from her world and assures her she will be safe wearing the silver shoes. Amy is surprised and says, your shoes? I thought they belonged to Dorothy. Lurline tells her Dorothy had them for a while, but they belong to the fairies. They are made from our magic. They will serve you well. They will serve you well if you trust in the power. Then she gave Amy a necklace with a pendant and told her not to put it on. It was not for her. She told her, you will know when the time is right to put it in the proper hands. Then she told her she had to send her back to Oz. Her last words were, there is more power aiding you than you know. With a flash, Amy was back in Oz in Emerald City in the palace, standing next to Knox, and Dorothy was still there raging. Amy could see through the portal cloud that she was destroying Kansas landscape. Then the portal closes. Dorothy fell to the ground with a sick thud and lay there unmoving. Knox and Amy ran over to her. Dorothy was real messed up when they looked at her. Dorothy had got messed up from the magic clock. She wasn't dead, but she looked damn near dead. Her body looked as though she'd been burned alive. Her flesh was charred and smoking. Her hair had been seared off on one side of her head, and her eye had melted into its socket, running down the bubbling raw meat of her cheek. Amy almost gagged, and then Amy stirred. Incredibly, horribly, she was still alive. She groaned, her fingers still twitching. It was time for Dorothy to die. Amy raised the knife over her head. But yet again, Amy couldn't do it. Loreline's words flashed in her head. Take care that you do not walk down the same road that she has chosen. She said to herself she was done with murder. On page 228, she tells Knox, I can't kill her. So Knox said, look at her. You know you don't have to kill her. Then he yelled out, the palace is coming down. The palace came tumbling down. Chunks of ceiling fell on top of Dorothy. Knox and Amy had made a quick dash and ran out just in time before the entire building came down. Emerald City's palace collapses. The heart of Oz was gone. The rest of the city was tore up too. It looked like an earthquake, and a tornado had hit Emerald City. As Knox and Amy looked around at the destruction, Lulu showed up with Ozma. She left the Tin Woodman's palace to see what was happening in the city. Amy told her, we just defeated Dorothy, restored order to Oz, and survived the collapse of the Emerald Palace. Lulu replied, the bitch is dead? Then she exclaimed they should throw a party. Then Amy says, I didn't kill her, but she can't possibly have survived the collapse of the palace. Amy says, I defeated her. We defeated her. She tried to unleash the magic of the great clock, but it almost destroyed her. There was no point in killing her. She's buried now under the entire Emerald Palace. Lulu responded, you didn't make sure she was dead? Do you know how many of my monkeys are dead because of that little princess? Do you have any idea how much suffering she's caused? You had a chance to get rid Oz of evil for good, and you just left her there? Amy responded, Lulu, the palace came down on top of her. Lulu said, you think that's going to stop a bitch like her? That was probably our only chance, you blew it. She snorted, you should have let the monkeys handle it. I know how to finish what I started, even if you don't.
Wow, so Lulu just had to straight up read Amy. She had to read her stuff too. She just had too many chances. She straight up thug, ain't she? She just had to tell Amy for the umpteenth time why the hell you can't kill a bitch. Why you can't smooth straight kill Dorothy. She said she could have did a better job. You know, she straight up just thug. Oh, did you get to that part where she put a gun on somebody? But, wait a minute. Okay, yeah, Lulu straight. She done. She ain't having nothing with Glamora have either. You ain't got to that part yet. She had to put a gun, but she straight up thug. She read Amy. And she was right. Okay, I'm let you finish. Go ahead.
So then Mommy shows up and asks Amy the same question about Dorothy. Amy tells her the same thing she told Lulu in the palace about the palace falling in on Dorothy. Amy says she has to be dead. And then Mommy responds, not if you didn't kill her, she doesn't. You're right though, she's not going anywhere for now at least. Then Amy gives a necklace and pendant to Ozma that Lelaine had given to her. Ozma puts it on and Dorothy's spell is broken, is lifted off of her. She speaks and her wings sprout from her back. Then Glamora shows up, then witnesses Ozma's transfiguration. Everyone bows in front of Ozma because they see that the true leader and queen of Oz has recovered and she has returned to herself. But Glamora is skeptical and doesn't believe at first. And Lulu gets angry. Lulu pulls a pistol on Glamora for not believing Ozma was really back. Ozma laughed out loud and told Lulu to calm down. Her senses are fully back and Ozma speaks as the Queen of Oz. She says, I don't blame Glamora for doubting me. I've been gone for a long time, but I promise you, Glamora, it's me. And with Dorothy gone, I can at last regain my rightful place as the ruler of Oz. Amy reminds everyone that still have to deal with the Gnome King. She reminds them he's with her mother. Gert announces they should celebrate with a coronation for Ozma. And then Ozma conjures up a small pavilion with a buffet of food. Ozma magically conjures up a small pavilion with a buffet of food. And then everybody eats. Amy brings up to Knox again about getting back to Kansas and the Gnome King. Gert and Mombi reminds Amy that the silver boots belong to Oz and she can't take them back to Kansas. So Mombi, Gert, Glamora, and Knox try a charming spell to remove the boots. It hurts and a charge emits from the boots and knocks them all back. Ozma had Lulu's monkeys send out word that Dorothy had been defeated and announced a new coronation for Ozma in Oz. So all the citizens of Oz come pouring into the Emerald City to clean it up and rebuild it. Amy tries to talk Knox into sneaking back to Kansas with her to fight the Gnome King to save her mother. Knox isn't supposed to leave because he's bound to Mombi, Gert, Glamora, and the Quadrant of Oz. He's officially the Wicked Witch of the East now. Knox and Amy overhear Glamora and Mombi talking about the Gnome King. They say Ozma had defeated him once before, and they're worried that the Gnome King would try to control Amy since she possesses the silver slippers again. Mombi tells Knox and Amy that Glinda might still be alive in Glamora, but Glamora is keeping her under control. Amy tells Mombi that she has to go back to Kansas to fight the Gnome King to protect her mother. Mombi is right about Glamora. Glinda is still inside of her and takes over her body. Glamora opens the portal to Kansas where the Gnome King is waiting. His disguise melts away, and he pulls Madison with him into Oz. So he disguise melts away and pulls Madison through with him into Oz. He then demands that Amy give him the silver boots. Mombi tells him no, they belong to Oz. When they refuse to give the boots up, he threatened to hurt Madison. Mombi managed to knock the Gnome King over the head with a tree branch. He let go of Madison long enough for her to run. Knox and Amy want to stay and help Mombi fight the Gnome King, but but Mombi tells them to run. He's too strong for them, and she'll have to fight them while they escape. The Gnome King gets away from Mombi and chases after them. They get away and run towards the yellow brick road. Ironically, without casting a spell, the road starts to move. Lift knocks Amy and Madison into the air like a magic carpet and carries them into the sky, escaping from the Gnome King. They don't know where they're going, but oddly enough, the road carries them over a desert out of Oz. They get to the edge of the desert. The road carries them to some mountains where the road dumps them. They weren't in Oz anymore. They were in Eve. Eve is where the Gnome King is from. They don't know why they're there, but they are there. They weren't in Oz anymore. They were in Eve. Eve is where the Gnome King is from. Eve is ugly and dark, nothing like Oz. Instead of a yellow brick road, it has a black winding road with dilapidated shacks that dot the horizon like scabs. Nothing was green or growing there. And that's where the story ends, at a cliffhanger. If you want to call that a cliffhanger. Now, I would give this story a 3 out of 5 stars because it was a hot mess. I didn't like the ending. And the most exciting part was the mysterious part was about the Gnome King. Now it makes you wonder. Now I don't even want to read another book to find, but I would read the next book after this, which is okay. Next book after this one is The End of Oz. Only because I wonder what happened with the Gnome King and the world of Eve where he's from. Most likely my next review will be The End of Oz to see what happens. Okay, Shaquita, you could say your goodbyes now. I want to thank my guest narrator who showed up today and let her introduce herself once again as the guest narrator.
Yes, thank you. Excuse me. Yes.
All right.
I'd like to take this time to formally introduce myself. I am Mr. Quita the Fairy. That's right, Mr. Quita the Fairy of the Bees. I am not a bee, but I am the fairy over all the bees. Mr. Quita. Since Miss Gigi the Reader was just too rude to introduce me.
What? Wait. Excuse you?
That's right. That's what I said.
You know,
The co-narrator.
no, guest speaker.
What?
Guest speaker, not the
Well,
guest speaker, not co-narrator.
I'm introducing myself. I'm taking this minute just to let y'all know, to let you know, and to let y'all know, let everyone know, I'm Shaquita the Fairy of the Bees. Thank you.
Wow.
Alright. That's just to let you know.
Excuse
That's
me.
just to let you know.
Wow. Okay.
Miss Gigi the Reader.
Yeah, that's me.
Alright. Let you have your mic back.
Thank you. Thank you for listening, and please like and subscribe.